Welcome to the Awe and Wonder AAC podcast. Today we're here with Kristi Roher, and we're talking about her perspective as a parent with a son with a degenerative disorder. So I'm Sarah Kinsella.
I'm Brenda Demonte.
And Kristi, can you introduce yourself and then tell us a little bit about your son, Camden?
Sure. I'm Kristi Roher. I live in Arizona, and I have an 11-year-old son, Camden, who lives with and thrives with Pelizaeus-Merzbacher disease, and it is as rare as it sounds. They think maybe between 200 and 500,000 births, PMD, the occurrence of PMD. But his story starts before PMD because Camden was a preemie. And Camden's prematurity had nothing to do with his PMD diagnosis. So Camden was born at 29 weeks as a result of me getting valley fever, which is something that happens in different regions of the United States. And so in Arizona, there are fungus particles in the dust here that sometimes you can get valley fever. Sometimes it's really minor because pregnant women are immune suppressed. It caused me to go into respiratory failure and sepsis, and I needed medication that they couldn't give me pregnant. So it got to a point on life support and such that they decided that they had to take Camden. And so he was a preemie. And that was our first journey because I have a healthy son who does not have any genetic issue at all. And then I was pregnant with my second one, and you're just kind of on this very typical journey. And then I have a preemie.
Right.
So I'm a teacher. And so all I can think of is like the sensory issues that come with having a preemie. So, you start asking people, you're like, so the PT comes by and you're like, teach me pediatric massage and teach me, we're doing skin on skin. We're doing just anything I can think of. And we left the NICU in about 2 months. Which was good. He did really well. And you leave with PT and OT and speech, and it's like, God be with you. And you're like, I'm going to do this, right? Because the mantra to me in NICU, and I know other moms I've talked to as well, is it's just kind of like, if you just do enough therapy, they'll catch up. And then you're like, oh, I'm going to I talked to Brenda about, we're going to therapize this just right out of him. He's just going to do so well. I'm a smart mom. I'm going to do this. Right.
Because right now you just know he's a preemie.
Right.
Okay.
He has like a stridor, which is like, so when he swallows and things, there's little things they're like, oh, that's a preemie thing. That's a preemie thing. And I had my own health. So we were in the hospital together for a long time. And then I kind of mirrored, I was like, my therapy became learning how to get to him, right? I can walk to the NICU. I can use my walker. I can push my own wheelchair. I can go without oxygen now. Wow. And so I just was in this very rehabilitative thing. And I will tell you that at least in my state, early intervention is kind of revered as this, like, it is so fixable. Like, this is so fixable. Which is interesting because my son at a year could not hold his head up still. And no one would really say anything to me about this. He was also diagnosed hearing impaired, which we'll talk about later. But so we were on this journey that was really kind of off where we ended up. And I wonder how many people end up there too, and we just kept doing more therapy, and I would pay for therapy. And we just kept thinking, like, when is somebody going to have a conversation with me about why my 12-month-old like is so floppy, like how, and no one really would say anything to me until he was a year. And then
so you had all the therapists there.
Yeah.
All the time, but not really just, not, okay. Wow.
And just kind of, like, I talk to people about like speech therapists blowing bubbles. It's like there was lots of bubbles being blown, books being read. And I felt like I read books to him. Like, I am a mom with book. We read books. Like, you don't need to read books. Please do something different than what I can do. Like, show me how to do this and show me how to interact with him. And I would say the first year that didn't happen very much. also, early intervention in Arizona was shifting to a dynamic where there was one lead therapist, and it was kind of whatever your child needed the most. And then that person was supposed to kind of do a full care kind of, I don't know. And I will tell you that when it was presented to me, it was probably the first hill I decided I was going to kind of stand on and say, nope, that won't happen here, because you were kind of choose what your child needed the most.
Right. Wow.
So he could hardly feed. He could not sit up. He could not, it was like, he needs all of it.
Right.
And I understand that maybe some kids don't, but he did.
Well, and I would say in that model, most parents pick physical therapy because they want their child to walk.
Right.
And most 1-year-olds aren't talking. So they're not looking at any delays in communication yet.
We had
a ton of people that had lead PTs.
Yes. Yes. And so somebody helped me, and I got a name of somebody, and this woman showed up at my meeting. It was definitely not like a lawyer advocate situation, but it was someone who showed up at my meeting, and she was very nice. And I just said, what's the exception here? Because whatever this is exception. I'm not sure what it is, but he still functions like a newborn, and no one will tell me why. So we're not choosing a therapy right now. And we didn't. So that was good. But we were learning sign language, because that's what you do with a child who maybe has a hearing impairment. And it's like, but he responds to us, and he looks at us, and he turns to his name, and like, but he's not talking, but he can't sign anything because he doesn't. So it was an interesting journey. We found a neurologist who I adore, and he just said, I think there's something going on here. There's enough different things. And we did a chromosomal microarray. Camden's condition, we were within the first few months of that condition being added to the microarray.
Oh, wow.
Which I'm sure has expanded even more now. And so he has PMD, which is it's a dysmyelinating condition. So it's in that umbrella of leukodystrophies. The world of leukodystrophies is vast, and they vary greatly. But Camden's is a slower degeneration. So I have met sweet, sweet families with little ones who could walk and talk until 3, and seizures kind of strip you of all of those abilities, and they're gone in 2 years. And it's very sad. Leukodystrophies are terminal. So when we found out about Camden's diagnosis, we did know that it came with a shortened lifespan. And we knew that because it's such a rare condition, the first information we were given was that maybe our other son also would have something. And the big emphasis in that conversation was that I should not have more children. And it's like, okay. And it's like, and we can get to that, but if you could tell us about him, that's going to be really important. It is an X-linked disorder, which a lot of leukodystrophies are, and a lot of boys have leukodystrophies as a result of that. So you have a healthy X, girls have 2 X chromosomes and boys have XY. So when girls have an X-linked issue, they're a carrier, and boys have symptoms typically. Although that's not to say that girls can't have different leukodystrophies that manifest in different ways. So Camden's degeneration looks different maybe than some other degenerations, but it's definitely there. And we have explored that for the last 11 years. We have definitely seen that. Yeah.
And I think I want to say that Kristi's really involved in the PMD organization. And so is Camden's dad. And I will say that when Camden did have words, actually, there are parents of young children who are, posting the videos of their kids saying words, and it's so exciting. And I think that Kristi does such a good job of being like, take all the videos, like she knows that's going to go away.
Right.
But she's also not going, oh, just, you see, it's going to be gone. It's not negative. I can't explain it. She's just like, embrace it. This is so great. Remember his voice, like there's 2 ways to look at degeneration. And I think Kristi has such a healthy way of looking at it. And she does a lot of counseling with those. She's not a counselor. I use that wrong, but I mean, she does counsel those with this those younger parents in earlier stages of this generation so beautifully. I don't know if you want to say something about that.
I think that we found out that Camden had PMD in May of 2012. He was born in April of 2011. And there was a lot going on at that time. Camden's dad and I were divorcing, and then kind of coming together and co-parenting this child that now had such a significant issue, such a significant condition that we had no idea. I mean, again, we got divorced under this pretense that he was going to catch up and we were going to have 2 typical kids. And so as we navigated this, we were also navigating a cochlear implant for auditory neuropathy, because for sedated ABR, like hearing tests for babies, you need myelin to generate those, to see that those nerves are working, for all those tests to work, also an EEG, you need myelin to see, like, do you have seizure activity? So it's interesting when your child doesn't have myelin, or whatever myelin they have, they're actively losing. So we found a group on social media, thank goodness, that was just like, cancel his cochlear implant. He can hear.
Wow.
They all fail their hearing tests. And the information you're getting is like, some guy in Paris is doing research on that. And you're like,
yeah,
because that's kind of what this community is it's just so few people, right. But the people who are in it are gold, and they help each other. So again, like when I was posting, mama, at Christmas time, and he says mama, and not a single person ruined that for me either. It's like, I'm so glad you get to hear him. And so, I have tissues here because I may cry, but I can still do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a huge part of degeneration too, though, is, it's hard. It's hard to talk about. It's hard to, and I think that's why this is so important. It's so important that we talk about what is so good and valuable in every day of a child's life, even when they're degenerative. So, one of the things that happens in that community is a PMD, like a conference. And so it was like, there's a conference, we're absolutely going. And it's in Indianapolis, and a sweet family runs that conference, and they've lost all 3 of their boys. And they do this out of the goodness of their heart. And the Riley Medical Center in Indianapolis, we were able to see a doctor who had seen cases of it. Camden's dad and I talk about, if you can spell Palazius-Merzbacher disease, right? Like, then you can be a part of the decision making.
Was that, Kristi, was that the first time you'd seen a doctor that had seen someone with?
The neurologist that did diagnose Camden had seen 3 cases.
Okay.
He's now seen 6.
Wow. So, and that was 11.
And he's like one of the chief neurologists at Barrows. And this is not a young man. This is a man who has dedicated his entire life to neurological disorders. And he's like, I've seen 3. There's a family that comes up from Chile. When they come, do you want me to give them your number? I mean, these are the conversations the day he's diagnosed, right?
So how amazing that there's a conference that's fairly accessible.
Exactly.
I mean,
exactly.
Yeah.
And you take your baby, and it's like, and then you see like power chairs and AAC devices and things where you're like, I don't even know what this is.
Right.
But I know around this time, one of my big conversations was, he can't sign. Like, we've been doing sign language, and I mean, like, really like teaching our 3-year-old sign language so he can communicate with his brother, and that's not going to work. So what's going to work? Right. And speech therapists kind of looking at me like, well, we can do PECs. That was the big next push, was we'll do PECs. And so I look up the picture exchange, right? And it's like, you want him to hand you a picture? Because he can't sign either. And it was like, somebody help me. Someone help me understand what this world looks like. Because at that point, I had never heard of AAC. I had never heard of devices. I had never heard of the technology of any capacity that was kind of available to Camden.
Right.
And at that point, somebody said, well, let's try a switch, right?
Right. And that was our dual sensory impairment therapist. So Camden diagnosed like visually impaired, cortical visual impairment, and this auditory neuropathy. And it was one of those situations where I didn't care what name we were putting on it. Marianne was gold. She walked into my house and she was gold. She looked at me and said, I don't know that I have the answer, but we're going to look at it together. And she was the first person to do that. And so I kind of clung to her. Like,
and how old was Camden at this time?
He's a year.
A year. Okay. Okay.
And he was in anyone who's had a child who the cortical visual impairment, hearing impairment, like maybe these are things that are happening. I know I've talked to other moms about like your glasses and hearing aids phase, that you didn't need either one of those things. Kind of look at Camden now and it's like, sorry about the hearing aids, right? Like, bless your sweet little heart. You know what I mean? It's like, ooh. This was all during that time. And she's like, I don't know that we need those things. We're going to talk to the doctors. And she said, I don't know a lot about AAC, but like, what about a switch? And so there's like a switch library where you can check out a switch, and always a therapist who's been around for a while. There's like a little white puppy that you can buy, and it's like a yippy dog. And so that was the switch toy that we tried, because that was the switch toy I knew about, and it terrified Camden. I mean, it was just like, it was. And then bless other people's hearts that came in our house and are like, let's try switches. And it's like, no, the switches are awful.
We don't need more dogs.
Right. So
it doesn't even matter what the switch was connected to.
He just equated it to.
As soon as he saw the switch, he cried. And I got to be honest, we haven't gotten there yet, but he saw the switch and he cried. It was over. Your session was over.
Yeah.
So don't bring out the switch. And I mean,
he was super smart. And we said that, that competency is so intact for Camden, and he's so expressive. That you'd get it was that red switch. It was that Big Mac red switch. That's what it was brought at. And he was like, hard pass. And then you're just like, well, let's try the red AbleNet switch. It's smaller. And he's like, there's
I know what that is. Yeah.
So but I will say, like, we've come a long ways, because Kristi's been part of the nonprofit Believe Beyond Ability, and we give away switch toys every year. And on purpose, we're adapting toys that meet different sensory situations, because her experience was like, nobody tried a vibrating toy. Nobody tried he was one, he did like bubbles. Nobody tried a bubble machine. Like, nobody tried something that wasn't going to startle him, so we learned a lot, even in her experience, about, gosh, we need variety with repetition, right? We just can't do repetition, because repetition created such fear that we have overcome the switch issue, but it took years, and it didn't take very long to make him scared, but it sure took him years to get away from it.
And it's interesting, because I think that experience and him reacting to that switch toy, I could see where a therapist, and maybe a therapist that wasn't as seasoned as Marianne was, could maybe think, oh my gosh, I really messed up. I really this was awful. Right. And it's interesting, because I can be an intimidating mom. I can be I think I can intimidate. I've heard that feedback before. But I will say that, I would cling to anyone who had any idea, because I didn't have an idea. This is a child who I desperately wanted to connect with and have experiences with. And I didn't know how to play with him. I did, like, how do you play with a child who can't hold a toy? Like, how do you, and it's like, so we read books and we talked and we sang songs, because that's all I knew how to do. And so, if you wonder if there were 6 hours of that someday, there were, because I just was so desperate to figure out what to do. And so anytime someone was like, well, I have an idea, it was like, say it out loud. Right. And it's like, I don't even need it to work, because what I have is no ideas. Right. So that risk taking that she was willing to do with me, even though it didn't work. And she said, like, I know there are other switch toys. I just don't have access to them. Like, let's keep trying. Let's keep doing this, and that's one of the big things about Believe Beyond Ability. It's one of the reasons it exists, is because there aren't a lot of switch toys out there. Think about it. And the switch toys that exist are not the toys that his brother's playing with. Right. And they're not like the characters he watches on TV, or, the books that he's reading. It's a white hippie dog that has no context of anything. So that was I know that through the years we have connected to and found things that have built on that experience. But she was willing to have that experience with us. And that is such a vital thing. And she was also willing to hold space for us, knowing that the next time she would come and see Camden, maybe he wouldn't know what it looked like before. Because the thing about degeneration is, if you are married to linear growth, if that is how you rate your value as a therapist or rate your value as a parent, you'll lose every time. You're going to have a really hard time enjoying the relationship with that kid, which actually and of course I didn't know that because I'm not a speech therapist, but I have a lot of speech therapist tendencies. I'm a data driven. I'm psychology driven. I run a testing program. So, I mean, if you wonder if I had an Excel spreadsheet of skills, I sure did, I did there for a minute. And a lot of what I've learned in the Camden journey applies to all kids, all people, all relationships, right? I mean, if the worth of that experience is based on the outcome only, it's going to be harder. It's going to be harder to walk away from the day you had and understanding your impact, I think.
Right. So Kristi, he's 1 year old and the switch is presented. Tell us about the journey from there to what he's currently using for communication.
So that continued with the DSI, and I was able to have some conversations with, so that was all through like the School for the Blind and Deaf, which is interesting because that is nowhere where our journey is now, but thank goodness for those people, right? And those were people who in Arizona, where I'm from, they were people who could hold space for a hard case. So like, this is all before school, and doctors, we have a lot of doctors, we're trying to work on lots of different things, but none of they're kind of like, just talk to your therapists. So the therapist became kind of a lifeline for the daily work and progress. Our doctors, especially once a doctor knows that you have a terminal degenerative, no cure kind of thing. I can't tell you how many times I've been told, like, what do you want to do, mom? And it's like, well, I'd like someone with a medical degree to chime in. Like, wow. I don't have an answer.
What a question. Yeah.
So navigating that becomes such a separate entity in my experience. And then the therapy piece was kind of what happens daily. How do we play? How do you interact? How do you communicate? And that team from ASDB, School of Blind and Deaf, they really started to say like, well, because I look up the AAC evaluation requirements. First of all, not 13 months was a big thing back then. I'm happy to say those things are changing now. It's exciting, but it wasn't that way then. And
in other words, Kristi, you're saying 13 months was too young at that time.
Yeah. So start PECs, and it's like, talk to me about how PECs can be, I'd started to learn about accessibility. That was kind of the first, like, now things need to be accessible because he's not going to, like, there's not enough therapy to make him reach out and grab that. So tell me now what we're going to do. Right. And then there's just people in that were in that space with me who would go, why do you think you have to do 6 months of PECs? Well, because that's what this said. And she's like, oh no, we're going to override that. And then eventually that looked like at 2, which it took that long because everything takes that long. I have not figured out how to quicken the system. If somebody who watches this podcast figures it out, contact me. Because quickening the system doesn't really work. But so Marianne and that team helped me get an AAC evaluation. And it's like, okay, great. And I will tell you at that point, lots of bubbles were blown, lots of books were read, and you just don't know what you're going to experience. Right. So and then Brenda Del Monte walks through my door and this amazing OT, Gina, and they just start doing things. They start talking, they start doing things. And Brenda starts asking questions like, what is he like? And what makes him laugh? And does he laugh when you guys do? And it's like, oh, well, he likes me. He likes kisses from me. He likes books. He likes farm animals. He likes, so we're kind of going over these things. She's really the first one to ask.
Ask what he likes.
Yes. And there was a sense of, panic a little bit when I was like, I don't really have that long of a list.
Right.
Because I'm not really sure. Right.
Right.
And there's that panic.
What I know about Brenda is probably as she talked to you about things in this AAC eval, it was you were like, yeah, actually, I do know all these other things, right? She kind of helps bring out what you already know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell us more.
So she starts to do things a little bit with switches, a little bit with different things, different access methods. And she starts to talk about eye gaze. But one of the things she did before that is she had him make some choices. And I know that she asked for like bubbles from Brenda or like kisses from mom. And he like immediately chose kisses from mom, like so fast. And then she asked him about like, so she put him on a device and it had farm animals. And she's like, find the cow, find the horse, find the sheep. And it was like, boom, 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 boom. I mean, he knew things. And it was the first time in our life, so after 2 years old, that he had demonstrated that. So I thought she was a miracle, right? And I thought, and it's interesting because I didn't give Camden credit at first. There wasn't a lot of credit at first for Camden. I think because there is a shock when you have a nonverbal kid and you're just trying to figure out your life. They're in there. Like they're in there. And so even when you want to believe it, like the whole time you want to believe it, when someone shows it to you and that barrier is broken and then there's no denying it. So I tell this story because Brenda leaves my house, Gina leaves my house, and my husband shows them out and he had to like catch me at the door because I just broke down and sobbed because it's like, he's there, and then from that moment on, there's no way you can't believe in him.
Right.
That's so true. And you know what? There's two things I remember about that day. One, I remember turning to you and saying, remember this. Yes. Remember that he's doing this. Remember that he's finding all these things. Remember that he's telling you things that you thought he would prefer the horse or something, and he picked the horse. And like there was all these things that were affirming in those moments. Yes. And at that time, we needed to trial 3 different devices, and we needed to trial the 3 different devices in the same access method. And so we were coming back with different devices to give all of those equal opportunities. And I knew then that some kids can do very well on one eye gaze device and bomb on the other 2. And in case he bombs on the other 2, I know she's going to doubt she saw what she saw because there's so much to take in on those evaluation times. So I don't know if you remember that, but I was like, remember this moment. Yes. You're like, girl, how could I forget it? But I will tell you, he didn't do as well on the other 2 devices.
He didn't, and I absolutely doubted him. So then, poor team and this crazy mom. And so I made them come back. They were there at my house 5 times because I made them come back and show me again, because it's like, what if this isn't true?
Right.
And that's really important for a therapy team to get right. Of course, like being on the right access method, be on the right software. I mean, all those things are so important. Right. We have navigated different software, different devices. There's definitely a different usage depending on those pieces. But I will say that even more for a parent, it's like, oh my gosh, what if, because so much depends upon that experience. Right. And I mean, I can't emphasize enough how much of my belief in our future, which is so at this point, so incredibly shaky, just like not having any idea of what it will look like. That was powerful. It was really important. And Brenda was patient enough to come back so that I had the buy-in I needed emotionally too. I mean, I understood the mechanism. I understood at this point, I had already learned everything there was online about that device.
You had your spreadsheets.
I did. Because that was going to be a way to unlock things.
And and how are we collecting data on this was like right up there with one of the first questions when we got it.
Or Brenda again, because that was, and then the next question, like, how can you be my therapist? How can you be our speech therapist? Like, how does that exist? And then Brenda's like, well, this is my job, and I do have ongoing clients, but they're not under 3. So, you can contact me, when he turns 3 to see if maybe I have an opening. So April 8th is Camden's birthday. It was like, happy birthday, Camden. Call Brenda Del Monte. Like, it was like immediate. Aww. Because she held the belief with me. She would do. And so people who do that, they're like gold. And it wasn't about like, talk to me about his degeneration. It was just like, talk to me about what he likes. Tell me what he does. Tell me what he doesn't like. Tell me. And it was just, it was who he was today. And it becomes such an important journey in degeneration.
And this is, I will say this, I wasn't the right person because I had all the answers. I wasn't the right person because I have heard of Plasius-Merzbacher. I wasn't the right person because I treated so many other people with that diagnosis. We were the right team because we were both so curious about how to move forward. And we both 100% believed he was in there, and that he wanted to be unlocked, so to speak. And he wants, nothing about his face says anything other. He expresses more vocabulary in 2 minutes of his facial expressions than most of us do in words for the day. So it was like, honestly, I appreciate this about Kristi a lot. And I'm thankful that I was far enough in my career to be honest and say, yeah, I've never seen anybody with this, and I don't actually know, but I want to try it. Do you? And it turns out that's all she ever needed. And by the way, as we get into her education, also, that's all Kristi's ever required of people who educate him is, I don't know how to do this, but I'm excited to learn about how to do this. Because if Kristi waits around for like an autism specialist, because my son has autism, she's going to find one tomorrow. If she waits around for a Plasius-Merzbacher expert, she's not going to find that. And it's not because we don't have resources here in Arizona. It's literally, we have a high level of resources for kids with disabilities, more than a lot of states, frankly, especially in the world of AAC. But that still didn't mean she was going to find that person. Right. So the hill that she was dying on is, do you know he's in there? And there where she would gently make changes in Kristi, in therapists and nurses and teachers. And I say gently because nobody got fired from her, but she, and by the way, Kristi's always been so respectful of all these people in her home. By the way, that might be a different one, because man, that the Grand Central Station that is her house, people in and out. But she's always been respectful of, listen, she's a nice person and she's trying the best she can. And she's too afraid to fail to try something that she doesn't know if it's going to succeed. And I gotta have somebody brave enough to fail. I don't know if you want to speak more to that fail piece, because I was not an expert on this.
No. And same here. I mean, I made him and I'm not an expert on him. So that, that's an important, and that's a really important component to having a medically complex kid. At least for me, I know that some moms feel like they're so connected to like the rhythm of their child that they feel really, really, they are the expert on that child. And I do think I am close to the expert on Camden, but Camden's actually the expert on Camden. And I let him be that person. So I work really hard with Camden to find ways so that he can tell us what he wants and needs in this life. So I am not the expert, because Camden, just like all kids, my 14-year-olds are also experts on themselves. And it's my job as their parent to help get them to where they want to be. Right. So when you're really, and one thing that happens when you give a kid AAC at such a young age, and you start to empower a child at a really young age, is they become themselves. They become a kid. And I will shout this from all rooftops. AAC is a gateway for a child who has no verbal voice, for them to know that I can be heard. And it doesn't mean that they're going to speak sentences like, I want the blue cup with the apple juice and the green straw kind of things.
Right.
It does mean that when communication is highly desirable for Camden, he uses it and uses it effectively. So, and that is through degeneration. That is through surgery. That is through, we now have an optic atrophy of his optic nerves, where he has, by 4 p.m., his eyes are so dilated, he can't access his eye gaze. And we know that. So he has head switches. So he has nonverbal yes, no. So he has low tech all over my house, because this is not about, she came in and gave us the right device, and that device was the answer. She came in and helped us see a mindset where every day you may have to do it a little differently. And if you really think about it, if you're a parent, that's true with all of our kids. And so that became really profound for me. And I don't need to be the expert on Camden, because Camden's the expert on Camden. I do have to listen to him and sometimes be his voice when people can't see it. So that's a really big piece. So, and I talk a lot about, we've had lots of nurses, Brenda talked about therapists. We've definitely had our fair share of therapists, nurses, school teams. Camden has been very lucky to have school teams that believe in him. They see competency in him. It is the most amazing thing when someone loves your kid, who is hard to communicate with and is scary. I mean, my son has rods in his back. He has a G-tube. He comes with a wheelchair and a nurse, who then there's this adult that sits in a classroom, and
it's a sensitive gag reflex.
100% gag reflex. It's kind of an initiation process with Camden. And so we've had, I've had therapists who are students of therapists who are disgusted, right? They're disgusted. And here's the deal. I can choose to be mad about that, or I can choose to look at that person and say, you should probably not do feeding either. Because that's, that there is and it's like, the world of therapy and the world of education is vast. I'm in education. I used to be a teacher and instructional coach. I'm now a school leader. And it's our job as adults, as we navigate our careers, to find the parts that work for us. Speech is vast. Like you may be doing a rotation with somebody and my kid throws up on you, and maybe you should do articulation. That bothers you, right? Because that's where, and so for me getting upset with that person doesn't help them understand that better. It's just, they're not our people. Like, you're not our people. So it's just, and here's the deal. I don't know that before I had a Camden, if a Camden had shown up at my door as a teacher, I don't know that I would have known what to do with him. I got to hold a lot of space for someone who walks into our life and goes, and it doesn't mean they don't like him. It doesn't mean that they are not, I don't know, the legalities of IDEA and how people get, and it's like, it doesn't mean they're not trying to give you something. It means they don't know how. I haven't met a lot of people with poor intentions. I have to say that. I have not met a school team who doesn't like my kid. That's not really what happens. I meet tired school teams. I meet tired therapists who are like, I don't know what to do with him and everybody else. And I can't do anything but just say, like, hold their hands and go, I totally get that. So I mean, I have different views, I think, than maybe some people. I want Camden to be the expert on Camden. I don't want to be the expert on Camden. I want him to find as much independence in this life as possible. So when you do that, you have a very empowered child who has lots and lots of opinions.
His favorite thing is, I don't like it when you touch my talker. I mean, in the beginning, he was like,
on his talker was like, yeah, I don't like it. So it's like, he yells at me when I touch his talker. And so it was like, well, let's give him a button that says, I don't like it when you touch my talker. So then you model, and every single time he's like, I don't like it when you touch my talker. And it's like, I don't know how else to model how to get there for you.
But I mean, then we also go to the doctor and his core word says, I don't like her, or I don't like you. And that's like navigation to 4 or 5 pages. And it's like, okay, this is the doctor that he doesn't like. And
there's a message. Yeah.
That's important. This is somebody that
walked in the room and didn't even say hi.
Yeah.
Like, you don't talk to him. Yeah. He doesn't like you. And then there's a whole part of me that's like, so then you have to lock all the buttons except sorry. Will apologize. Like the next thing you say will be an apology. And then you have to have like a sidebar, like he said more words.
Right. That's when you're texting your people, right?
Oh no. She left and we were like, we fist bumped in the doctor's office. But
be respectful, but thank you for saying a sentence.
Right.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And having your opinion and being able to share your opinion.
Well, yeah. So we did create a monster, meaning we created a typical 3-year-old who was sassy and said all the things. And then he started school. So let's talk about the IEP, the dreaded for most days. And for you, I mean, and you're so experienced, but still, and you have such a great team right now, but I'm sure it's because you have another son who is also in the system of IEPs. Do you dread the IEP? Yeah. Okay. So this is my thing.
So obviously I've cried like through this. I am like I said, I may cry, but I get things done. I'm a crier. So every IEP ends in me crying in my car, even the good ones. Okay. So like there has never been, I never come out unscathed. And part of that is because the structure of IEP is to discuss what they're doing well and what they're not doing well. There isn't an experience if someone does that about your baby, right? Like if everyone sat through an IEP, everyone, you're not leaving in a warm, fuzzy feeling. So that's just part of it. So preparing yourself, being at the best mental clarity you can be to be in a meeting like that is really important. I think for parents and for teachers and therapists. I mean, I have walked in to situations and I have heard conversations start with individuals who needed a minute before they walked in that door. They needed a minute. And I'm so sorry that the system did not allow them to have a minute, because I know that the system doesn't lend to people having a moment to gather their thoughts and to have a conversation about our kid. We try to hold a lot of space for a new person. Like he has a newer speech therapist right now. He had us at school, and he had a speech therapist for a long time who was amazing, who really learned with him. They grew together. I mean, she wasn't and know all the things, but she grew with him, and now they rotated her out, because that's what happens, right? And this new person is not expected to have answers about him, not even a little. She is expected to be respectful. She is expected to, I will tell you, if anyone has actually spent time with Camden, because the first conversation is like, that Camden. And it's like, I know, because he's a lot. He is charismatic. He is boisterous. He wants to be popular. Like right now, he wants to be TikTok famous. And you're like, okay, you are not old enough to be on TikTok. So there's all these things about him. So anyone who's ever spent real time with him, right away, because you're not getting the, surgery. You're not getting that, because that he's over his surgery, and he already asked his teacher out on a date 2 weeks ago, because that happened on his AAC device. Do you want to go out sometime? And I want to hold your hand. And so you already know that is because that's Camden. He's just that way. So when we're in the IEP room, we have, I mean, I've sat through the, his IQ is so low, and this is where he is. And you're just going, thank you for talking about a test that doesn't really measure my child's intelligence. Right. And so you're just kind of, but it hurts, and it hurts, and it's necessary, because for our kids to get what they need, there have to be labels, right? You have to say they're neurodegenerative. You have to, and sitting in an IEP with a neurodegenerative kid means, preparing yourself for the percentages, right? You need to prepare for that data collection and the percentages, and working on some of the things that, and not meeting that goal most of the time, not being the goal. And so, and then needing to kind of hold on to anecdotal moments of clarity on that team. So it's like, I know that he's only doing this 38% of the time, but when we're having like a really good brain day, because we have days that are really hard, you can tell with his face, even hard to control his face a little bit. He can do it like that. Or, once he recovered from this surgery, because this population, I mean, there's surgery, there's illness, there's nursing shortages, and so you're just out of school for a long time. And so it's like when he's able to be here consistently, based on everything that's going on, so that teacher's not judging us, or that is not saying, well, you don't get him here. I mean, they're understanding like there are obstacles here. And so when that team can do that, and just give you anecdotes. I mean, there is not a moment that I think Camden's dad or myself just don't go, thank you for working with him. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of the team. We do. I was talking a little bit about, sometimes Camden has a teacher that works with him, like a gen ed class. And as he's gotten older, his self-contained class teacher has really pushed for more mainstreaming, which has been amazing. It's not always amazing. Last year it was magic. It was magic. Camden went to science camp just like other kids, and the kids love him, and it was amazing. This year has a little bit less magic. It's not bad. She's just new at this. And I thank her for trying it. I thank her for being there. I don't expect her to have all the answers. If he was in my 6th grade class, I don't know that I would have had all the answers. So again, it's just, I don't expect, I guess I don't expect them to know more than I do about him is a big piece. And I don't know what that would feel like as a mom of a child with autism, but I have a child with Down syndrome. And I will say, even the Down syndrome experts kind of look at my kid and go, I don't know, he's a little different. It's like, right, because he's a kid, he's his own kid, Right. And so there are parts that, that maybe we don't all know. And when someone says to me, I don't really know exactly how we're going to get there, I almost exhale in those moments. It's like, good. It's when someone walks in kind of with this idea that they have all the answers, I get a little bit hesitant about that person, because probably not. And it's like, and then that means a journey of them kind of getting to that place.
Right.
And for both of your boys, but it's like, if it's interesting, they're going to be 100% on whatever data sheet you pull out. If it's interesting.
Right.
And if it's not
really important,
if it's not, they're going to be below 25% on something. So very much interest level is driving. And that's so very typical. I love though, depending on I think we actually air this one before we have Camden's teacher on, but she talked about saying, when I started inclusion, I was like, if there's a substitute, I don't send him. And do you remember this?
Yeah.
Okay. And so what was the response?
I was like, why? I said, the first thing I ask is it harder for you to send him when there's a sub? Because if I'm asking more of a human, because that's what a school team is, they're humans. If I'm asking more of that human than is possible, that doesn't mean that person can show up for my kid. Okay. These are hard jobs, guys. So it's like, is it hard for you? And she's like, well, no, but, and I said, well, if you're worried about him, he can handle having a sub. So
even he gets to come home and tell you that he had a stupid
teacher wasn't there today, and he doesn't know why she wasn't there. And like, did you and I remember him being like almost like, did you know that there are people who saw, like, did you know that can happen? Like, there can be teachers who aren't your teacher. And it's like, yes, so that's a whole thing, and so, exactly. And I
talk about.
Yes. And anything that can broaden his world, it doesn't have to be good. It doesn't have to be happy. The world's not like that. I mean, there are going to be hard things. And so, and I think we shelter medically complex kids a lot from hard life, which is interesting because I've never met a kid stronger than my medically complex kid. I mean, he has had surgery. He has had doctors who handle him before they've asked. He's had therapists who ask so much of his body, he has more resilience than a lot of kids I've ever met. Well, he can have a sub. I'm like, that's like the easiest thing he's done this year is have a sub. Right. Give it to him. Like, let's have that experience.
And he's heard his older brother complain about subs. And now he's like, oh, I had a sub. You know what I mean? Like the most normal things. I remember till the day I die, I remember talking to him about Inside Out, and we were talking about Bing Bong, and we were talking about imaginary friends. And I did this with like 11 home-based kids that week. And I asked that each one of them, do you have an imaginary friend? Everyone says no, because I've established a yes, no with everyone already. And he says yes. And we start to get into it, and I can't even handle it. So I'm writing it in a Google Doc that mom can see at any time, because we share a Google Doc when he was writing things. And I'm like, oh my gosh, did you read the Google Doc? And she would, and Kristi's like, I had an imaginary friend, all these things. Listen, you know what my like data sheet for that day looked like? I struggle, right? I struggle. He answered WH questions because I'm like, what? Who is it? Is it a boy? Is it a girl? Does he run? Does he talk? All these things, right? Guess what? If I looked at every question I asked and he answered accurately on his device or with yes, no's, he was 100%. So can he answer WH questions? You bet. It's, when he especially can answer WH questions when I don't know the answer. Right? So I'm not testing him. I'm not saying, is your name is Camden? He's not going to get that right. Does that mean he doesn't know his name? Absolutely not. It means he cannot be bothered. Right. So really what we're always trying to do is AAC. And as soon as we pull out a data sheet, sometimes we lose it, but we're making human connections. And this is what I hear about you saying in the IEP. Like if you're walking into an IEP and they're giving you the IQ test, fine. But if they're saying fine, because that's the system and you're in the system. But if they're saying, oh my gosh, that kid, all he wants to do is know about Jimmy Fallon's latest thing or whatever it is. Right. Cause I was talking to Dad and he's like, he's into WWF fighting now. Like he kind of wants to watch fighting,
which is, by the way, not even remotely surprising.
And nothing that you guys are into in your homes.
Not even a little bit.
And so it's like, where do you get that? Yeah. But that means people are taking time to get to know what he likes, because that's not part of the culture of their home. We've seen that with like some kid will be like, I want AC/DC. And mom's like, I don't know why. It came on the other day. He went bonkers. And now we have to have some we have to have some really heavy metal times at our home. And that's not me, that's him. And it's like in the IEP, in the paperwork, in the this and the that, whatever. But when I walk in and these people know these things, then I know they know my kid. And that means I know he worked hard to tell you that, because everything's hard. It's hard to communicate, right? And I feel like that that's the big thing. We've gone through different devices with him. We've gone through, and by the way, the layout mattered. And it was like, wow, he could do this on the other device, and we're not really seeing that on this one. And there was just lots of different things I learned over the years with him.
And to progress through to add to that, Brenda, he had, Camden was on word power. He was on word power with a certain amount of buttons. And then we had to make sure he had access then to bigger buttons. So it's like he had I need my big buttons, where that switched then to an AAC that had obviously less words on a page, but was manageable, because as he's gotten older, access has changed for him, because that's a lot of what his degeneration looks like. It also looks like I make sure a device is charged every day for school, but I get home at 4:30 and we are no longer using a device.
Right.
Because his eyes can no longer do that. So my method of communication with him is a lot of an eye gaze board, or through just choice making. And anyone who has a kid with degeneration may experience, one of the things they may experience is just how that level of fatigue by the end of the night, where then he's not talking anymore. He's done for whatever happened that day. He has news on a step-by-step button that school does. And if there's any school people who listen to this, the step-by-step with the day is amazing. And then I record what happened that night and he shares that in circle. And I will tell you that there is never a time that he is sick or tired enough to not want to share his news. He wants to share his news every single night. And he has heavy opinions about what's shared in that news.
Yeah.
So it's like, sometimes it's all about like some embarrassing thing his brother did. And it's not about, the books he checked out at the library, or he, the walk we took and saw the Halloween decorations. He just wants to like razz on his brother because he's 11. He doesn't want to talk about the nice walk he took with his mother. He wants to talk about his brother slipping on the tile. Like, that's what he wants to talk about.
And what I love about the step-by-step for the teacher is she doesn't have to know how to program some high-tech button on the device every day as all 13. We had her on. I think she has 11
or
right now.
Let's be honest, or the para, or the sub, or the nurse, because life happens in a classroom. So it's like, or life happens at my house where it's like, oh my gosh, I didn't do the button. And the nurse is like, no problem. Just tell me what to put on it real fast, because
it's a quick report thing.
Exactly.
Right.
So having different access methods is so important. I think probably with all kids, but in degeneration, it's really important, because you just never know when the whatever you have just adopted and went all in on, we have been one flu away from losing, like Camden was 5. My kids brought home a virus. It was not an exciting virus, but we lost the ability to eat. In that one virus, because those are things that can happen with degenerative kids. So it's hard to be all in on one thing.
So, and Kristi, you mentioned how he has the button like in word power that says, I need my big buttons, so to switch from the smaller to the bigger. What are some other things that Camden does to advocate for what he needs during the day for his access?
So Camden, it's very important. Again, knowing Camden is important. He can advocate for himself, but access is hard. So if you're already at the point where he's yelling, the sensory, you've missed some sensory steps, right? And don't get me wrong. And here's the deal. If someone tells me a teacher's like, he yells all the time, I am not going to be like, well, you didn't see the sensory, because guess what? Sometimes he yells in my house too, and I've missed those sensory steps, and I only have one of him. And 2 kids who can more take care of themselves. I don't have a room of 8 kids in wheelchairs and everything that comes with that. So I think that he can, that's kind of we've gone too far. He can cover his eyes. Sometimes that's work avoidance. Sometimes that's, I need to change. So if you ask him, like, do you need something different? He will put his hand down and look right at you, because he's like, well, I'm listening. What do you want?
Right.
The valid yes and no. Camden's no is like this. His yes is looking up.
And he has a button on the device that says, ask me a yes, no question.
Ask me a yes or no question. He also has on his device, I need my low tech board. I want my low tech board. So he can ask with just one move, not 4 to 5 moves. Like, I need something different.
Right.
That is going to be too much. He's not.
We're not doing core words. I need, and then we're not doing that.
At that point, you just need to say it. Yeah.
And if that's something, as he gets older and we continue, and his journey looks like continuing eye gaze. Obviously, we did that eye gaze knowing that with the motor degeneration that he's going to have someday. Eyes may be what we have left. So that's where we started. He can do head switches. Sometimes he really likes head switches. He likes it more for gaming and accessing, like playing games, and accessing music and things like that, accessing what he wants to watch on Disney Plus. Not so much communication, but it doesn't mean we don't practice it. It doesn't mean he doesn't have access to it, because I don't get to decide when he likes that. And as he gets older, I try to remember he matures just like everybody else. So we'll see kind of what that looks like as well. But it does mean that those buttons are easily accessible. And it also means that when we are done looking at the eye gaze device, that we put that away and don't continue to try to force, just like we wouldn't a typical 11-year-old, we wouldn't just keep asking the same question, right? We just keep being like, are you mad? Are you mad? Are you tired? Are you tired? Are you tired? And because what happens then? There's a shutdown. And then they don't, and then it's like, I don't want to communicate at all. So a lot of it has to be led with him. one of the biggest ways that we keep Camden communicating with us in any realm is to talk around him. So he's out with us. Everybody's just talking. And, somebody get like, hey, Camden, but you're not standing there going, hi, Camden. Hi, hi, Camden. Right. No, if you do that, he's like, are you wanting something? Yeah.
Do the face.
He does this face like that.
So don't single me out. Don't single me out. I'm 11. No.
But if you and you kind of walk away like you would just anyone else, sometimes you'll get like, hey, hi, what's up? He'll do one of these and you're like, oh, okay. And then you have to act cool about getting that, right? Just like cool. He's a tween. You have to kind of do that. And that's, I wish it were more sophisticated than that. It really isn't. A lot of it is giving him his space to find out when it's worth it to communicate in the manner that's in front of him. If you're a school team and you haven't attempted an eye gaze device yourself with your fully myelinated brain, you should. It's hard.
Good advice. Yeah.
You should. It's really hard. You also won't say, I want the blue cup with the green straw and the apple juice. Right. You will
and then try it before you had coffee and after you had coffee, right? Like different times. Right. Yeah, so true.
Well, you would say drink, 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 just like kids on at least my child on AC, or he'll be like, fun, 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 fun. For example, we were doing an activity and he was doing something he didn't particularly wish to do that day. And it was 118 degrees outside and he wanted to go on a walk. And so he's looking outside and he's like, night outside, nice, cloudy. And I'm like, it does look cloudy. And he's like, nice, walk. And it's like, no, it's 118 degrees. Do you see? He's trying to convince me with nice, cloudy, walk. Like, look at it outside. And so then I say, like, I hear you telling me how nice it is outside. I'm telling you it's too hot for a walk right now. And we're going to do this. So I guess I feel like, and that's 9 years of AAC, folks. That's what that looks like. But that's clear communication to us. That is exactly, and it's effective. It's effective.
Definitely.
Right.
So, right. Kristi, we are asking all of our podcast participants at the end of our podcast, we're asking, what do you want people to know about you? Because we're talking about another perspective. This is all about you guys. And so as a parent with a child with complex needs and a degenerative disorder, what do you want people to know about you, Kristi?
As a parent of that.
Yeah.
I think there's a couple things. One of the things would be that nobody inherits in an amazing way a kid like Camden without a pretty significant story. So understanding that trauma in every capacity exists is woven in the lining of that journey. So, and it doesn't mean that it's all bad. I mean, it's amazing. I have never had more, I've never learned more than I have by raising Camden, but it doesn't mean we came out unscathed. I mean, he was on life support. I've been on life support. We've done our fair share of hard. And I haven't met anybody on this journey. Maybe they haven't had the same journey that we have, but nobody has come out unscathed. So understanding that there is no one who meets you at that table at the therapy table or at the IEP table or at the conference table, who is more equipped than the other person. That doesn't exist. I mean, I have 2 master's degrees in education, and I'm just still a mom who cries about her kid on a podcast today. Like this is what it looks like. Yeah. So I do think that it's very important to be gentle with families who are doing this, who are navigating this. The other thing I think is really important, and I've said it in a couple different ways in different contexts, and I try every time I can to say it to a school team or a therapy team. You're tired. you're tired and things are hard, and my kid might be hard. And you might really want to tell me how my kid is hard. And you might try to find a really professional way to do that. Maybe you're going to, and I'd say that about both of my kids. Maybe you're going to talk about non-compliance, or maybe you're going to talk about the need for additional support in more sensory experiences, or whatever it is. And I think we use different words. Non-compliance is a big one that we use professionally to say your kid is hard, right? And I think that sometimes, and maybe without even trying, but sometimes to try too, because you're tired, people will very much want to communicate to you how hard that child is. And what I would say to you, and I've been a teacher with hard kids, and I've been a principal with hard kids, and I've been an instructional coach with hard kids. And here's what I'm going to tell you. I know. Yeah, I know. They've been hard every hard day of their hard little life. They've been hard, so I know with my middle son a lot, we'll say something about how hard it is to teach him something. And it's like, right, 6 years of potty training. Like, I'm still waiting for my medal to show up. So I hear you, but I do think that maybe think about why you need to say that today. Like, maybe think about what it is, So I would say that, I want people to know that I didn't get here without a story. And we are all just clinging to hearing the good.
Yeah.
And by the way, what's the harm in that? What's the harm?
Which is not a degenerative thing. That is that's a parenting thing. That's an autism thing. That is just the world of special needs clings to the good stories. And if you can't come to the table with one, you need to think about your relationship with that kid or your role in that situation, I think.
Yeah.
That is a perfect answer. And I don't think I've learned more from a parent than you. I think I've learned more from you than any parent I've worked with. And I'm so, so grateful for you to come on. And I'm so
much fun. Thank you.
To, I mean, the conversation is priceless. The vulnerability was incredible. And I know this was a hard thing. And I love you, and I'm so glad you came on.
Thank you.
I couldn't have asked for more from you regarding just the honesty of today's conversation. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you guys so much. If there's anything else is there anything else I need to do?
No,
thank you so much. This is going to be so good for people to hear. So it's amazing to talk to you. It's great for me to hear, but there's just so many tidbits that I think, okay, I can't wait for a therapist to hear that,
Oh,
yeah, this is,
or I can't wait for a parent who feels in isolation to hear that too. Or I can't wait for people to hear you're capable, you're smart, you have all the degrees, you work in education, and it's still hard. Like, that's actually super validating.
Yeah.
Everyone in the process, and grace needs to be given to all people.
Yeah. Well, if you can find her, the one who's not like crying about her degenerative kid on pot, introduce her to me. Like, I don't know. I mean,
that's not who we want, though.
Yeah. This is hard stuff. And I think, and the parent who shows up with the lawyer and the advocate and is mama bear, by the way, that's just how they feel like they can safely get into that situation, right? That's just their coping mechanism for how to do this, because they can't do it alone. And they can't, like, every time I see an advocate or a lawyer who would walk into I was a case manager for a while in a school, and way before I had special needs kids myself. And every time it would happen, I remember I'd say, wow, the communication or whatever it was that got us here, they can't trust me. They don't trust me today. That's all and it's like, if you really think about that, that is a profound thing in itself. That is emotional and vulnerable in itself.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't think about that when someone walks in like that. We think,
right.
They just can't, we think about how much harder it's our job.
Well, we think they're mad at us. They blame us for their kids' progress, but actually you're right. It's just like, I can't do this alone.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right. And possibly you're right too, that I don't trust people, or I don't trust all the people at this table, or I've been blindsided before. So with nothing against you guys, but I don't trust my previous people. I mean,
and make no mistake, I've gotten close. I mean, like we've had, they tried to take nursing away once, and it was like, I had one conversation without a lawyer in me. And then if that hadn't gone well, which I'm glad it did, but if that had not gone well, you bet your bottom dollar I would have needed help. Right. Because when it comes down to it, that's the mechanism. But I've been lucky to have open conversations with people who don't have the answers, but want to move forward together. That's what it comes down to. Yeah.
That was a big takeaway for me, Kristi, hearing you speaking, because I can think of a million times when I would say, oh, okay, I'm going to go back. If I could go back, I would approach that meeting differently. Or so, I mean, yeah, you've made me think now about what I'm going to do and how I'm going to approach that. And
also
know to make mistakes.
That you are a person who has a life and your own stressors, and your job is hard, and you're not expected to come to that meeting perfect every time. It's impossible. Like, it's not possible for you to be perfect in every meeting. So, and it's like, and if my meeting is the one where the teacher needs to say, like, I get really close to him and I talk to him really slow and I pet his arm. I mean, I could have gone off the rails about it. Mm-hmm. All that told me was where she is in her inclusion journey, and she's just beginning. And I'm so glad Camden's going to help her through it. Like, what a cool thing for my kid to do. She's new, and then you go home and you say to your kid, does she pet you? And he kind of looks at me and I said, Camden, she is just learning how to talk to a Camden. So be nice to her. Hold space for her.
But I love that story. But I also think that the biggest takeaway for all of us is, if you don't have a personal story to tell about the student you're about to walk in on an IEP in, you have to consider, how have I made a human connection with this student then? And if not, then how do I change moving forward? You have to be able to walk into a meeting and earn the trust by showing that you have earned the trust of the student by knowing something that isn't in the paperwork.
And let me put my administration hat on for just a second. And you are an overwhelmed brand new OT, and you have so many kids at 3 schools. Here's the deal. You know which one you need that with first, right? We all know who the kid is we need to start with. You don't have to start everywhere. You just have to start somewhere. So it's like I would say to a person listening to this who's overwhelmed by saying, like, you have to make a personal connection with everybody. I hear how hard that is. So start where you think it's needed the most.
Right.
Unfortunately, though, let's be honest with ourselves. We want to start where it's easy.
Yeah.
Shouldn't.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So that's, and then if you walk up to a teacher and say, hey, what's their jam? And the teacher goes banging their head into the wall. And then you go to and it's like this, you go to the PE teacher and like, I don't know. And nobody knows. Boy, does that say a lot, right? That says a lot about, so it's like, okay, be the person that makes that change and do it for the one. Because maybe the speech therapist has a handle on this one, and maybe the teacher thinks this one's adorable. And this, this child has this, or this kid really likes PE, but find the one that you need to do that for. Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Good message.
Okay, we could talk forever, but we want to be respectful of everyone's time. But this was amazing, and we really appreciate you being on here. So
thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.